In criminal investigation, a locked room scenario presents a specific, maddening paradox. It is a system where the boundaries of a crime scene remain intact, yet the occupants have been forcibly extracted. On June 7, 1992, investigators in Springfield, Missouri confronted this exact paradox. The residence belonged to Sherrill Levitt and her daughter Suzie Streeter, who had returned home alongside Suzie's friend, Stacy McCall. By morning, the house was a void, containing their worldly possessions but devoid of the women. Understanding the mechanics of this locked system requires analyzing the perimeter. There were no shattered windows, splintered frames, or structural indicators of a violent invasion. The vehicles belonging to all three women remained parked in the driveway. This structural integrity makes the vanishing deeply perplexing. The architecture of the house served as a sealed container, preserving a moment in time while erasing the sequence of events that led to the abduction. The procedural reality of the scene revealed a chilling precision. When concerned friends arrived, they found the front door unlocked, suggesting it had been opened from the inside. The only exterior anomaly was the shattered porch light. Yet the glass shards were meticulously swept up. Inside, the procedural cataloging of the space painted a picture of interrupted domesticity. The women's purses were lined up, and their keys were left in plain sight. Further forensic assessment deepened the confusion. The living room television was left buzzing with static. The family's dog was highly agitated but physically unharmed. In the bedrooms, the beds appeared slept in, and damp washcloths were found in the bathroom. Law enforcement documented a timeline that simply stopped. Every artifact suggested the women intended to remain in the house, yet the mechanism of their removal left no footprint. The immediate consequence of this undisturbed room was catastrophic. Because the house bore no obvious signs of a struggle, early responders processed the location as a routine missing persons inquiry rather than a critical crime scene. In the desperate hours before police recognized the gravity of the situation, friends and family walked freely through the house, inadvertently compromising the environment. This well-intentioned intrusion effectively destroyed any subtle clues the room might have held. The lack of blood or overturned furniture meant investigators had no definitive starting point. Without immediate physical evidence of a struggle, detectives could not determine if the women were coerced or tricked. The pristine nature of the room became the greatest adversary, allowing the critical first 48 hours to slip away. For the families, the psychological impact of that seemingly normal room was suffocating. When Stacy McCall's mother arrived looking for her daughter, the sight of Stacy's flowered purse sitting untouched on the floor acted as a devastating anchor to reality. It was visceral confirmation that Stacy had not run off. The everyday objects left behind transformed into monuments of unimaginable dread. That dread rapidly bled outward, paralyzing the surrounding community. The intact room shattered the illusion of suburban safety in Springfield. If three women could be silently extracted from a secure home without alerting a neighbor, no one felt protected. The psychological toll of the empty house weighed heavily on the public consciousness, turning a quiet residential street into a permanent symbol of vulnerability. As days turned into weeks, the investigation was forced to transition away from the house and into the broader mystery
of the perpetrators. The logistics required to control and transport three adult women without a trace demanded a level of sophistication rarely seen in opportunistic crimes. Detectives recognized that the answer lay not in what was left behind, but in the calculated execution of the abduction. This shift marked the beginning of a decades-long descent into one of the most haunting cold cases in American history. The Springfield Three became a definitive study in absence. Every aspect of the
investigation would circle back to the terrifying reality that the physical evidence was simply gone. The search required investigators to chase shadows, navigating a labyrinth of dead ends and a silence enduring for over 30 years. Springfield, Missouri sits as a gateway to the Ozarks, surrounded by dense, unforgiving terrain. The mystery of the missing women expanded rapidly from the manicured lawns of Delmar Street into thousands of acres of rugged topography. Investigators were no longer just looking at a suburban home. They were staring down a vast geographic labyrinth defined by heavy woodlands and isolated service roads that offered countless blind spots. Beneath the surface, Greene County presents an even more daunting environmental challenge. The landscape is a honeycomb of limestone caves, abandoned mining shafts, and deep sinkholes hidden beneath thick brush. For law enforcement, this environment transformed a local mystery into a logistical nightmare. The sheer scale of the subterranean networks and dense forests surrounding Springfield threatened to swallow any trace of the victims forever. When physical evidence is absent, every missing persons investigation relies on a foundational aspect of behavioral profiling, the reconstruction of victimology. This aspect requires detectives to build a comprehensive data matrix from a void. Investigators must categorize the disappearance by meticulously mapping out every known associate, daily routine, and recent interaction to establish a baseline of normal behavior. Once this baseline is established, the analytical aspect of the system isolates the anomaly. Detectives chart the intersecting lives of Sherrill Levitt, Suzie Streeter, and Stacy McCall, cross-referencing phone records, bank statements, and witness testimonies. By creating a minute-by-minute timeline of June 6th, law enforcement attempts to identify the exact moment the routines were violently interrupted, using data to outline the shadow of the perpetrator. Moving to execution, the procedural reality of this aspect demanded a massive sweep of the women's social circles. Detectives systematically interviewed hundreds of high school graduates who attended the same parties as Suzie and Stacy that Saturday night. Every friend, ex-boyfriend, and casual acquaintance was brought in for questioning, their alibis scrutinized against the timeline to rule out localized foul play. The procedural scope widened as local police integrated with federal agencies. The FBI arrived in Springfield, entering the biometric profiles of the 3 women into the National Crime Information Center database. Simultaneously, search and rescue teams executed gridded, tactical sweeps of regional state parks, utilizing the victimology profile to predict potential disposal sites based on the logistical constraints of the timeline. The immediate consequence of this massive procedural effort was a paralyzing realization regarding the complete lack of actionable data. Despite thousands of man-hours and an unprecedented pooling of resources, the investigation stalled. The dedicated tip lines generated immense volumes of noise rather than signal, overwhelming dispatchers with well-meaning sightings that lacked any forensic corroboration. This profound lack of physical direction forced investigators into a reactive posture, chasing phantoms across the Midwest. Unsubstantiated rumors and false confessions flooded the precinct. Detectives were obligated to run down every lead, diverting critical time away from the core timeline. The absence of a traditional crime scene meant there was no anchor to verify or dismiss the escalating wave of public speculation. For the families left behind, this lack of resolution bred an agonizing, suspended state of grief. Janice and Stu McCall, Stacy's parents, found themselves trapped in a psychological purgatory. Without a crime scene, a ransom note, or a body, they were denied the basic mechanisms of mourning, forced to maintain a highly public vigil while privately enduring an open-ended nightmare. The emotional weight of this lack permeated the entire city of Springfield. The realization that an unknown predator had successfully executed a flawless abduction and vanished back into the ether left a permanent scar on the community. Suburban security was exposed as an illusion. The void left by the three women became a haunting reminder that in the absence of answers, fear becomes the only certainty. To combat the psychological paralysis gripping the community, law enforcement shifted their focus outward, launching an extensive physical search. The strategy pivoted from analyzing the pristine interior of the Delmar Street house to scouring the rugged landscape surrounding the city. Investigators realized that if the residents offered no answers, the physical terrain might hold the key. This transition required mobilizing thousands of volunteers and deploying search dogs across hundreds of square miles. The physical parameters of the investigation expanded exponentially, moving outward in concentric circles from the epicenter of the abduction. Every abandoned barn, culvert, and stretch of highway became a potential dump site that had to be systematically cleared and documented. The topography of the Ozarks presented a formidable adversary to these ground efforts. Springfield sits on a karst landscape, a geological formation defined by dense forests, deep ravines, and a vast subterranean network of caves and sinkholes. This environment is notorious for swallowing secrets, offering countless natural hiding places that could conceal evidence from even the most diligent search parties. Navigating this terrain meant battling thick underbrush and unpredictable weather. Search teams combed through heavily wooded areas where visibility dropped to mere feet, making aerial reconnaissance nearly useless. The physical reality of the Missouri wilderness meant that an organized grid search could easily miss critical anomalies, leaving investigators to wonder if they had walked right past the location they were desperate to find. As the ground search stalled, focus snapped back to the mechanics of forensic evidence processing. In 1992, this system was heavily reliant on traditional methods. The protocol for evaluating a crime scene dictated that trace evidence be collected and cross-referenced against known databases. However, this framework requires a point of comparison or a clear sign of a struggle to generate actionable leads. Without a centralized, rapid DNA database like CODIS, biological evidence carried far less immediate investigative weight. The evidentiary system depended on matching physical clues to a specific individual already on the radar. In a case where the perpetrators left virtually no trace and took the primary evidence with them, the traditional forensic framework was severely handicapped, unable to generate a profile from the void. Detectives meticulously re-examined the few anomalous items left behind, subjecting them to rigorous procedural scrutiny. The broken glass from the porch light was collected and analyzed for tool marks, yielding no definitive forensic link. The answering machine tape, inadvertently erased by a well-meaning friend before police arrived, was seized and sent to the FBI laboratory in Quantico in a failed attempt to recover the lost audio. The three vehicles parked in the driveway were towed to a secure impound lot and stripped down by crime scene technicians. Investigators dusted the steering wheels, vacuumed the upholstery, and processed the trunks, looking for microscopic transfer of soil or fibers. The women's purses were inventoried item by item, confirming that wallets and keys remained untouched, ruling out a simple robbery but providing no forward momentum. The sheer volume of dead ends triggered a systemic crisis within the Springfield Police Department. The local infrastructure was not built to sustain a multi-year investigation of this magnitude. As thousands of tips poured in, the department had to reallocate resources, pull detectives from other critical cases, and establish a dedicated task force just to manage the overwhelming flow of information. This relentless pressure permanently altered the operational fabric of Springfield law enforcement. The failure to secure the crime scene immediately became a cautionary tale, prompting a complete overhaul of local missing persons protocols. The disappearance forced the city to modernize its communication systems and confront the harsh reality that their jurisdiction was not immune to sophisticated violence. For the residents of Springfield, the morning of June 7, 1992, fractured the city's collective sense of security. The realization that 3 women could be cleanly extracted from a densely populated neighborhood without triggering a single alarm or witness account left a permanent psychological scar on the community. The emotional paralysis was most acute for the families left behind, particularly Stacy McCall's mother, Janice, who transformed her grief into relentless advocacy. Without a crime scene or a body, the families were trapped in ambiguous loss, where every unidentified remain discovered in the Missouri woods reignited the trauma. Moving beyond the immediate grief, the failure to locate Sherrill Levitt, Suzie Streeter, and Stacy McCall exposed critical vulnerabilities in regional law enforcement strategies. The early hours of the investigation demonstrated the lethal cost of fragmented communication between neighboring jurisdictions, proving that local police were initially ill-equipped to handle highly organized multi-victim abductions. This specific operational failure forced a permanent shift in state policy. Missouri modernized its missing persons databases and mandated rapid response protocols, stripping away the archaic assumption that missing adults had simply chosen to walk away and abandoning the mandatory waiting periods that cost investigators crucial hours. In the immediate aftermath, the physical space of 1717 East Delmar Street became a grim, structural ghost in the middle of a quiet residential block. The house sat empty for years, its pristine facade drawing morbid onlookers, while serving as a daily, inescapable reminder to neighbors of the invisible violence that had bypassed their own locked doors. The surrounding community adapted to a permanent state of hypervigilance in the shadow of the empty house. Porch lights were left burning from dusk until dawn. Deadbolts became standard hardware, and the casual, open-door trust that once defined this Midwestern enclave was permanently replaced by a hardened, cautious exterior. Decades later, the Springfield Three case continues to shape the forensic understanding of no-struggle abductions. Criminologists analyzing the 1992 files recognize that overwhelming victim compliance is achieved through sudden psychological intimidation, a synthesis that altered how behavioral analysts profile home invasions where the structural perimeter remains intact. Ultimately, the most haunting detail of the entire investigation remains the shattered glass of the porch light resting on the concrete driveway. It stands as the only physical disruption recorded on the night they vanished, a single broken bulb marking the exact moment 3 lives were swallowed by the dark.